Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I wanted to talk about the Season 3 trailer for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon and talk more specifically about two things that we see in the trailer. There's actually a new group here, and I want to talk about the ceremony that we see happening in the trailer, and I also want to talk about this newer character here and give some thoughts on what I see people talking about, which is this Rick Grimes' brother? So I do want to talk about that, talk about the possibilities of that going into this season here. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I will be posting my full season review for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2 this Sunday, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to go through everything from episode 1 all the way to the finale, talk about what I liked and what I didn't like and what I hope, I guess, Season 3 is like. So yeah, definitely make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like that. But let's talk about what I wanted to talk about here. So there's two things here. There's a Walker ceremony thing that I think is happening, and then there's also the idea of Rick Grimes' brother here. So I guess I'll focus first on the whole ceremony thing because I think that that's kind of interesting and obviously will play a role in terms of, you know, the community that we meet and how this community operates and, you know, how different it could be for Season 3 here. So in the trailer, we see Carol here, and obviously she's looking at some fire that's happening here. And when you actually look at what's going on here, everyone's dancing in a certain way. So there's obviously a dance that they're all doing here that it seems like it's a ceremony of some kind. If you actually look at what's being burned here, it's like masks and stuff like that. And so I wonder what this means overall, if this is some sort of like Walker ceremony of some kind. It's really hard to say just based off of this because you're not really seeing a lot, but it looks like they're celebrating something here. And what's funny about this though is whatever's happening seems, you know, concerning overall, just because if you look at Carol's reaction to it, like she is almost reacting like, you know, in shock, like how is this happening or how could you be doing this sort of thing? And so, I mean, I don't know, maybe her reaction right away is, you know, very different. Maybe she is more amazed that this is even happening in the first place, right? Because maybe it's something that's just like really amazing. Like, wow, I can't believe that this is actually happening at this point in the apocalypse. I have no idea. But the thing is, when you go to a previous shot in the trailer, you actually do see like this very same mask here. So first of all, you go to the ceremony shot here. On the very left here of all the masks, like where the fire is, you actually see that mask that when you go to this shot over here, when Daryl's walking by, you see this mask here being brought somewhere. And so I'm not entirely sure what this means in terms of the story here, but obviously these masks here, they're being brought somewhere here, and it looks like some sort of ceremony is going to be happening later on that night. And I'm guessing this is going to be episode 2. Like, my prediction for how the story is going to go here for Season 3 in the first 2 episodes anyways is the very first episode, we're going to see Daryl and Carol go to London and try to figure out a way to get back home to America. I think they'll end up on this boat right here, and they'll try to go back to America, but something will probably happen. Maybe, you know, somebody like captures them or something. I'm not entirely sure what they'll do there, but they'll end up in Spain, basically. And so I think that's basically going to be the ending of episode 1. I think in the beginning of episode 2, we'll see them travel to this place right here. And I mean, I guess this place could be, you know, the good group overall. Like, I don't know if this is the villain group of the season yet. So maybe there's something really off about the ceremony, but overall, like, it is fine. Like, we'll have to wait and see, I guess. But then I think after this, like the next day, that's where we see a lot of shots of like Daryl driving out there and whatnot. And I think we'll start to get into a lot of what the season is actually going to be here in terms of like the villain and what the story is going to be. So this ceremony here is really cool. Honestly, I'm excited to meet this new group here and see exactly, I guess, what this community is about. You know, like, what are they doing here? The reason why I sort of focus on them like celebrating the dead and whatnot is because I think it would be such a cool way to, I guess, meet a new group overall, right? Like, if you really look at the Whisperers, they were the last group that sort of did that, and they were the most fascinating group overall. Like, obviously that's very different because the way they celebrated walkers and whatnot, it wasn't really a celebration. They lived among them, and they sort of believed that this was the new way of life now. This was the next evolution, right? And so I think that this is going to be very different here in terms of they're celebrating walkers maybe, or remembering them, but I think it's going to be more in that respect there, just literally to pay your respects, you know, to, I guess, the walkers or what have you. Like, maybe there's a certain celebration happening here, right? Like, maybe every single year on this specific date here, they celebrate walkers or like something for, I mean, I don't know what reason, but there's some sort of ceremony happening here, and it's really interesting in terms of how this is overall going to play a role in the story. But I do think that it seems a little like maybe they could be villains, but I don't think they're going to be villains overall. I think that this is just going to be a new group that you know, is maybe going to be seen that way at first, but I think right away we'll learn, okay, never mind, no, they're the good group in all of this here, but the villains, you know, I guess we'll at some point meet the villains here. And so that's where I want to get into this character here, because out of all the characters here, I think we can sort of assume who everyone is, right? Like, if you see the ceremony happening here, everybody here for the most part, I mean, it's a group overall. You do see this one character here that, you know, it looks like he's walking over the balcony here looking down at Daryl and Carol. This might be the very ending of episode 1, right? Like, I could see that happening here. I don't think he's a villain. He just seems like a protective leader, I would say. Like, he's wondering, like, why are you here? Like, in reference to Daryl and Carol, right? And so I think there's a lot of questions about that. I do wonder if this sort of, you know, if he is very protective over this community, if he has a reason to be. Like, obviously, if he's being very protective over the community, there's got to be, you know, another community out there that he's dealt with. Maybe there's a connection to France. Like, maybe he knows a little bit more about what happened in France in terms of, you know, there was references from Madame Genet about the monsters they made in reference to, like, the France government, I guess, that may have created the Walker virus. I don't know if that's the place that they're going to be going here with the story, but it seems like that's sort of where they're going overall. And I wonder if that's something that other, you know, places know about overall. And so maybe, you know, people in Spain, I mean, obviously France and Spain are very close together. Maybe they've heard stories, or I'm not sure, but I think that there could be a connection to what, you know, happened in France and other communities that have been around. And so I think that'd be kind of cool to connect the story overall to season 2. But that's why, to me, I think that this character, I mean, being a very protective leader overall and wondering, like, who is this in terms of Daryl and Carol showing up, like, that just makes sense because, you know, Daryl and Carol could be from any sort of community that might be trying to cause problems, right? Like, that's sort of how every community operates for the most part. I think that the Commonwealth is very different now, but most communities have always operated that way. Like, whenever a stranger walks up to the door, you're just like, wait, who are you, sort of thing. And usually if you let that person in, they cause a bunch of problems, right? So that's what makes this character here very fascinating. And honestly, I've been watching this scene like over and over again, literally just like the couple of seconds that this character is here on screen. And so the one thing that I've noticed is, first of all, he is playing a guitar here. There is something in front of him that I don't really know what that is. It could just be like armor or something like that. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but there's something that's sort of in front of him here. And so, I mean, the character obviously is playing guitar here, so the character just could be singing. Honestly, this character reminds me of like Daryl and Rick, just because obviously for Rick, in terms of like the horse, and I guess the hat as well is kind of similar, but also for Daryl, it's like the longer hair, and it almost looks like a jacket that, you know, Daryl would wear. That's the one thing that I will say in terms of this season overall, is that it really does remind me of Red Dead Redemption. Like, it really is giving off those vibes overall, and I think that honestly that is really incredible, because I would love a Red Dead Redemption zombie story in some way. I think that would be really amazing. So in terms of who this character is, I have seen a lot of people saying that this is Rick Grimes' brother, and so I mean, I'll give some thoughts on that. I don't think this character would be Rick Grimes' brother. I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. But in terms of Rick Grimes' brother actually showing up this season, like, I think that, I mean, this is going to be the time to actually do that. Like, in season 3 and 4, if you're not going to introduce Rick's brother, because obviously in the comic, Rick's brother is in Spain, right? And so in season 3, they are going to Spain here. And I also have to clarify, like, I know on the show, Rick has never mentioned his brother ever, but in the comic, it's the same thing. Rick has never mentioned his brother ever. So they're just not that close, I guess. Like, I don't really know why, you know, he's never really mentioned his brother in the comic. It's just, it's something that's a little weird. But obviously in the show as well, if they were to introduce his brother, it would also be something that's, you know, I guess strange overall, because, I mean, yeah, like, again, he never really talked about his brother ever on the show. So if they're ever going to do that comic storyline, like, this is the time to do it, I would say, because, I mean, obviously you could have the characters show up at any point, but in terms of it being believable overall, having him show up in Spain makes a lot of sense, because that's where the character was in the comic. And I think doing the whole brother storyline for Rick, like, you have to make it believable. And so, you know, following the comic as much as you can. Like, obviously in the comic, he does die right away. He wouldn't die in the show here, or maybe he does die at some point this season, and that's just sort of where you end it. Like, Rick's brother is never going to really reunite with Rick, but that's fine, because we never really heard of Rick mentioning his brother anyways. But to have the character show up here in season 3 and 4, even if he is killed off, it's sort of following the comic story anyways. And so it would be really cool if we actually, like, got that story. I think I would be really excited for that, because I think it just to sort of, you know, bring back any other character that could be a Grimes, I think would be honestly really amazing. And so this character here, is this character Rick's brother? Is there any connection at all to Rick's brother? I don't think so. I mean, honestly, this could just be Daryl. Like, it's really hard to say. Like, the hair reminds me of Daryl, but that's really it. I don't think Daryl would have an outfit change at any point, but I mean, it would be really cool if in this season, like, instead of like riding motorcycles and all of that, that Daryl was actually on a horse. I don't know if we've ever seen Daryl on a horse ever. He's always had a motorcycle. So I think to actually get that and have, you know, scenes of Daryl on a horse or whatever, it would be so cool. Like, I think it would just fit this season really, really well. So I'm not entirely sure where they're going here, but I do think that this character, like the way the trailer sort of plays out here overall, is this character's probably just going to be on a horse, you know, playing guitar or whatever, just sort of hanging out. And then we do see a shot here where we see Daryl riding his motorcycle here, or I guess he found a motorcycle at some point through the desert here. So I feel like Daryl at some point is going to come across this character here, and this character could just be a mysterious character. But I mean, honestly, like if this character was Rick Grimes' brother, honestly, that would be really cool, but I just don't think the character would be. The one thing that I hope that, you know, if they were to ever introduce Rick's brother, that they should really just, I think, you know, have as a part of the story is Rick and his brother Jeffrey Grimes just really don't talk at all. They're really not on good terms at all. Like maybe they're just completely different people. Like Jeffrey Grimes is just very different from Rick Grimes, and so they just never really got along. And maybe before the apocalypse happened, you know, Jeffrey left already like a couple of years ago, like a long time ago. He lived in Spain, or maybe Rick never really knew where he lived overall, and so they just really never kept in touch overall. He just like left the family. Maybe he never really like ever met Carl ever either. It would be really cool, honestly. It would be so cool here. And like, again, I also talked about this like a couple of months ago as well. I think a way that they could do the story here is if Daryl and Carol found something out about a character named Grimes. I think that would be really cool, because like they would think that maybe there's a connection to Rick, and then obviously they find out that no, it's not Rick at all, it's his brother Jeffrey. And you could obviously make the connection there, because I think that, I mean, first of all, the name Grimes, like you're not going to hear that name everywhere. And I think if they met this character and they're like, oh, you're not Rick, who are you? And they're like, Jeffrey Grimes. And then they would be like, well, do you know a Rick Grimes? And then maybe he's like, yeah, he's my brother, kind of thing. I mean, obviously you have to write it in a way that's not so cringy like that, I would say, but I think there is a way that you can pull it off where it makes a lot more sense for the story. And again, as long as you don't have Rick's brother reuniting with Rick, I think you can pull this off, because reuniting those characters, I think would just be different, because the characters aren't really like, yes, maybe they know each other, but you know, from our perspective, they don't know each other like at all. So the reunion won't really matter overall. But I think if the character did die, then it's something that Daryl and Carol could just tell Rick later on when they see him. And maybe Rick doesn't really care overall, because again, maybe they've just haven't really been that close like ever. But it would be a really great way to tell that story, and just tell that story from the comic. And I think that it definitely would work overall. But yeah, so definitely post all your thoughts down below in terms of who you think this character is here. Do you think the character has any connection to Rick at all, or is this going to be a character that has no connection at all? Obviously, I think that the character is probably not going to have a connection at all, but I still think in terms of Rick Grimes' brother's story, this is the one time to do it. Like, if you're going to do it at all, it's going to be in season 3 or 4 of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. I think that after, you know, season 3 and 4 are over, if the character is not introduced at all, then we're probably never going to get the story like ever. I just don't think that it makes a lot of sense to ever really do it after that, because you'll be away from Spain. This is the one time you had Daryl there, so I just think that, yeah. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.